Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Nicole. I'm so excited to be crafting with all of you today. We are going to be making some really fun spiderweb artwork. And we're going to be using a salt painting technique so that it creates kind of this fun raised texture to your painting. And you can do them in a ton of different colors and shapes, different sizes. If you want to make small ones or big ones, it's totally up to you. So we're going to go through all the supplies that we're going to be using, and then we'll get started. So to make your salt spiderweb today, we are using some construction paper. So you can use any colors that you want. I went with sort of a Halloween collection of colors here, but any color paper will work. Even white paper is totally fine. And then we're going to be using salt. So I've just got some like fine Morton salt here, and we're going to be using a lot of this. And then watercolors. So we're using our Creatology watercolor kit here. And then I have a cup of water. So as you can see, my little paint jar. And we're going to be making sure that we're putting quite a bit of water on our watercolors to make them really saturated. So to do that, we're going to be using some paint brushes. So I have a couple different Creatology sizes. Any paintbrush size will really work for this craft. Because we're kind of just dropping the watercolor onto the salt, and you'll see all those steps as we get started. So any paintbrush size will be fine. And then to draw your spider web, if you want to draw it first, you can use a pencil and a ruler. So depending on what type of spider web look you want to do, we'll do a couple of them. If you want it to be really straight lines in between, then we'll use a ruler to do that. But something more like this that's sort of all curved, that one's just a freehand drawn. And again, you can do that with a pencil, or you can just draw it directly with your glue bottle, which is what you're also going to be using. So I have a bottle of Elmer's glue here. Any white craft glue will work. And then lastly, if you want to add any fun little details like a little spider to your spider web, that's what these little cuties are here. Those are just some little black pom-poms. And you can use either sparkly ones or just a regular black pom-pom. You can also make spiders in different colors. So if you want to use other color pom-poms, you can. And then just a black marker to add some little legs on there as well. So I think that's everything that we're going to be using. I'm going to turn my camera around so you guys can see my hands, and we're going to get started. So with this to start, let me move a few things out of the way for us. As Nicole said, if you have any questions as we're getting started here, if you have a question about supplies, or if you want to share maybe something that you're doing differently with yours at home, put it in the Q&A. Let us know. We love talking to you all. So we're going to start though with a piece of paper. So again, any color paper is fine. This is like just a slightly thicker construction paper. It does help if it's a little bit sturdier, just to support the water and everything from using the watercolors. But even like a notebook paper will work. It just might take a little bit longer to dry or be a little bit more fragile. Okay, so we're going to start with drawing our spider web. Again, you can definitely just use your glue to draw with instead, but I'm gonna choose to do a little drawn one first. So I'm gonna take a ruler because I want to have my straight edges of my spider web, and you can use any sort of flat edge as well. So side of a book or another sheet of paper, if you don't have a ruler, that will also work. And we're just gonna draw 2 lines in these corners. So we're gonna make kind of like a big L shape. And so I'm just gonna put my ruler down at the bottom, and I'm just gonna kind of look at it from above and just kind of eyeball. So instead of measuring exactly how big, I just wanna make sure my line is straight. It doesn't have to necessarily be exactly level, but just straight. So I'm just kind of looking at this, and then I'm just gonna take my pencil and just drag my pencil along the edge of the ruler. And then sort of hard to see it on the camera here, but you can just faintly see that little pencil line there. And I'm using a pencil so that when we put our watercolor and our salt on it, that's going to fade away. If you use a marker, it might still be visible underneath your painting, which might be a cool look as well. So if you want to do that, you can. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing along the other side of your paper. So I'm just kind of lining up where I see my little pencil mark at the bottom here, and just kind of lining that up. And then I'm just going to drag my pencil again along my straight edge. And then kind of see this little line here. And then from the corner of where my two lines meet, I'm going to line my ruler or my little straight edge up and line this up diagonally. So meeting from this corner and going up toward the opposite corner. And drawing a line there. And then I'm going to do the same thing in between these two sections. So I kind of have these two little triangle sections on my paper, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to line up in the corner here where all my lines are meeting. And it doesn't have to be exactly even between your lines. I'm just kind of putting it somewhere in the middle, and then I'm going to drag that line out. So start to see portion of my web, and I'm going to do the same thing here. So again, I'm lining up my ruler, and I'm just kind of laying it in between the outer line on this edge and my middle line. And then I'm going to take my pencil from the corner and go up diagonally again. And so you can see on all these lines, they're not all exactly even. And I like that look with a spider web. When you look at a spider web, sometimes there's big portions that are longer or shorter. And that's why you don't have to use a ruler at all. You can just freehand draw your spider web as well. But so I've got all my first few lines here. And then I'm going to draw these little like curved lines. So you can see in our sample here, we've got our straight lines coming down from our point where they all meet. And next we're going to draw these little curved lines. So all these lines, and they are just going to be freehand drawn. So I'm just going to draw from where my corner is. I'm just going to go up from between each of these little triangles, and I'm going to connect them with a little curved line. And you can draw as many as you want. The more you draw, the more salt and painting you're going to need. You can start to see there. Just kind of curved little lines in between each. And then where my curved lines are is where I'm going to start my next section and connect those lines. And there it's starting to look more like a spider web. And you can skip a section if you want to. You can add as many lines as you want. If you want to do one here and then maybe one in the middle. It's nice when some of these lines are connecting along your straight lines just to mimic a spider web, but as spider webs tend to do, there are oftentimes little broken edges or pieces that don't all connect. Okay, so now you can see my spider web is drawn here. And so this just gives us our outline of where we're going to put our glue and then our salt. And if you haven't already, one thing I should mention is that it is nice to maybe have something to put all your salt in. So what we're going to do is we're going to now use our glue and draw on top of all of our spiderweb drawings we just made with glue. And then we're going to pour salt on top of that. And that's what's going to create like a nice 3D look, as well as once we add paint to it, it absorbs it and kind of spreads on its own, which is really fun. So it's nice to maybe have a place to shake your salt off, similar like when you're doing glitter or things like that. So if you just want to grab like a plate or a bowl, something that once you pour the salt on top, you can then kind of dump it off. So if you want to grab something like that, I just have like a little cookware as well that will work. Like if you want to ask an adult, if you don't have something accessible right now, that would be great. You can also just dump it directly into the sink if you're not going to reuse the salt to make multiple paintings today.
Tessa,
Yeah.
do you think you'll be able to go back over those spider lines again? Marissa was curious if she could get another view on how that was done.
Absolutely, yes. Let's do another one right now. So I'm going to use another sheet of paper to just show you guys, again, the drawing of the spider webs. And a lot of our samples here, as you can see, we have on black paper, which I think makes your salt painting really stand out. So if you're using black paper, I think that looks great. But it's a little bit harder to see all of my drawings and things like that on the paper. So I'm going to show you on a sheet of orange paper, which also I think is really cute. Okay, so if you want to draw straight edges for your spider web, we're going to take your ruler. And again, if you don't have a ruler, you can use any sort of straight edge. So you could use the side of a book, you could take another sheet of paper. You just want to get something that's going to be able to rest your pencil against and draw a nice straight line. So I'm putting my ruler in a little bit from the bottom, from this corner, and just kind of looking at it to make sure it looks relatively level. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Mostly we want to have, instead of like a curved line, we want this line to be straight, but it could also be at an angle if you wanted to. So I'm looking at this. So I'm going to hold down my ruler, and then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to drag the pencil along the edge of your ruler. So that's going to be your first line on your spider web. And then I'm going to move my ruler going vertical, so going up the paper instead. And I'm going to line it up so that I can see just a little bit of my pencil line coming out to make sure that it's going to meet. And then I'm doing the same thing, just kind of lining this up to look fairly level. And then I'm going to drag my pencil along this edge. So now to start your spider web, you should have kind of like a big L drawn on your paper. And then we're going to take our ruler or your straight edge, and we're going to draw a diagonal line. And this is going to be roughly in the middle. Again, doesn't have to be exactly, but I'm going to line up from the corner. So where my two lines meet, I'm going to line up my ruler there, and then just kind of facing it at an angle toward this corner. I'm going to draw a line diagonally there. And then we're going to do the same thing by adding two more lines in between these two triangles. So I'm going to line up my ruler in the corner again, where all of my lines are meeting in the same corner. And then again, I'm going to have this sitting at an angle, my ruler now. And you can make your sections as big or as small as you might want. But I want to make sure that I'm lining up in the corner. And then I'm just going to have it like roughly in the middle between this line, my diagonal line, and my bottom straight line. And then we're gonna do the same thing at the top here. And as you can see, not all of my lines are exactly even. So we've got like a bigger piece here than a smaller one. And that's totally fine. We're not measuring in this craft. It's really just to have a straight line to follow with your glue, more so than making sure it's exactly even. You can, if you'd like to measure it and do exactly in the middle, that would be great, but you don't have to do that. And next, we're going to now connect all these lines with fun little curved lines. So going from, you can kind of pick a spot anywhere, starting on your first outer line here. I'm going to draw a little curved line to connect to the next long vertical line. I'm going to do that again here. I'm just doing little curves. You can have them as big. You can make them really swoopy if you want to. They don't have, or they could be even straight. And you can do as many as you want to kind of in between these two lines. And then we're going to connect those again. And then you can mix and match. So if you want them all to be exactly the same and all of these lines match, that looks great. You can also add an extra one here and there if you want to. And there's your spider web drawing. And you can make it as big as you want. I'm taking up a good portion of the paper here, but you don't have to take up that much space. You can make it smaller, or you can go all the way to the edges of your paper. Next, if you want to draw a spider web that is like a whole spider web instead of just this sort of corner style, so similar to like this little sample one, this one, we created straight lines still in the middle here and then connected those. So let's see if my pencil shows up for you guys on this black paper. But to do that, we're going to draw a straight line sort of down the middle, straight down the middle of your paper. And then we're going to draw two diagonal lines. So I'm going to cross my ruler over my center line. I'm going to cross my ruler diagonally. And I'm going to draw another line here. So now you kind of have a little like X. You can kind of see that little shimmery pencil line. There you go. So you kind of have a little X shape. And then we're going to do another line through the middle again, but going the opposite direction. So I'm going to line up my ruler over the center of where those lines meet and draw another line to make like a little star shape. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to connect all these lines with our same little curved mark. So we're going to start in one and connect over with a little curved shape. And you can do that all the way around. And we're doing this over and over again just to connect all our lines. And this is why I like to kind of draw it out. You can get an idea of what your painting is going to look like before you put the glue on your paper. But again, you could just be freehand drawing with the glue itself. And if you are already doing that, then you are just going to have to wait if you are waiting for the next step. But if you're ahead of the game, that's great as well. And so there you kind of see on that paper. And you can, so not every line meets up perfectly. As you can see here, I left like this top one open. This one doesn't meet exactly in the corner. It's kind of fun to mix and match. You can add as many as you want. Okay. So there's a few different spiderweb options. You can also just freehand draw it. Like I said, if you want to freehand draw it with a pencil or just straight with the glue. But instead of using a straight edge, you could just draw big curved lines. So you can kind of see I have just a curved shape, and then with similar to the other ones, just little curved lines to connect the dots again, or connect the lines. So that's another option. It's really quick and easy. You can just freehand draw that. Also, if you want to do more of a curved or organic lines instead. Okay, so now that we've got a spider web all drawn up, we are going to start with our glue. So I just have our white Elmer's glue that I got at Michael's, of course, and you can use another brand if you may have Creatology white glue, that works as well. And so now we're going to, using the glue bottle itself, we're just going to start slowly covering our lines with glue. So I'm just holding, just giving us a little squeeze, not a lot, because you want to have control over the line that you're drawing. So I'm just barely squeezing the bottle and letting the glue kind of trickle out. I'm just going directly over the lines that we just drew. And if you have a spot that looks a little thin, or you want to add a little bit of glue, you can totally go over it a little bit more. Just know that whatever you're drawing with the glue now is going to be kind of the final outcome of what your painting is going to look like. So if it looks really thick in a certain spot, then it's going to look thick in your painting as well. And then we're just going to connect all these lines with our glue. Start to see our spider web coming together here now in white glue. And then again, you can go back over if there's any areas like this first line I drew feels a little bit thin compared to the other ones. So I'm just going to go over it again. And there you have your outline of your spider web. And we're going to do a couple of them. So if you aren't done quite yet, that's okay. But if you are done outlining your whole spider web in your salt, then what we're going to do is I'm going to take just like a little baking pan here, but you can use a bowl or just over your sink. I'm going to sprinkle my salt on top of my glue. And you want to make sure that you are totally covering it. We want to make sure all of that glue is getting touched by the salt. And then we're just going to dump that off. So now your salt spider web, which already looks very cool and crystally with just the salt on there and no color yet. Looks so fun. But next we're going to add the color. And so we're going to use our watercolors. Watercolors here. And we're going to take our brushes. And again, you can use any kind of size brush that you want. I have my brush, and then I have my little jar of water here. A little bowl, anything will work. And you can pick any color that you want. So if you want to do traditional Halloween colors and purples and blacks and oranges, or maybe you want to make a pink or a blue spider web, there's no wrong way to paint it. So I'm going to put some water and start mixing some water on top of my watercolor color of choice. I'm going to start with a little blue. And as I get some water in there, I'm kind of dipping my paintbrush back into my water and adding more water to the little paint pod here, just to get some nice liquid. You can see that's really moving in this little pod of paint. Make that nice and wet, and then you can transfer that directly onto your salt. And as you start to drop some water on, it will just start to kind of grow. And start to see as I add some water, and it will start to kind of just take shape and continue growing out. And this is what's fun, then you can add multiple colors. So I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm going to add some pink next. Again, I'm dipping my paintbrush back in my water, getting a little bit more water on there so that my paintbrush is totally saturated. And then I'm going to drop some more paint onto my salt. And I'm just barely tapping the salt, and you can see it starts to just grow and grow. And it's kind of fun to mix the colors, so you can tap them together a little bit and they'll meet. And if you feel like you don't have enough water on your paint, just dip your paintbrush back in your water a couple times. And so as you can see here, where some of our colors are starting to mix, it starts to create a fun little like tie-dye color. And you can do as many different colors as you want. So we can switch this up and maybe add a little bit of orange. And you can just kind of drag your paintbrush over a little bit. Again, just let it kind of barely tap a few areas, and it will just start to expand as the water meets the salt. And then your salt and glue and everything is still wet. So again, I'm just barely kind of tapping my brush against it, and it starts to fill out all the color. And so you don't need to put a lot of pressure, because you can still smear your glue if you try to. And if you want to mix your colors more, you can go back in even, and you can layer them a little bit. And then once you feel like you've got enough paint on there, your spider web is complete. You are able to set this aside to dry. And then the colors, as everything dries, it will get more and more saturated and it will turn into being even more solid in color as the glue dries. And there you have your own little spider web. So we're gonna do another one together here. We drew a couple, so I'm going to grab another one of our, and I just dropped my ruler, sorry everyone. But I'm gonna grab another one of our sheets of paper here. And so we have our little spider web that we drew here on the black paper. And we're gonna do the same thing. So if you weren't ready to start yet, or you're still gluing your first spider web, we're gonna do those steps again. So we've already drawn our spider web, and now I'm gonna take my glue and I'm going to outline all of the marks that I just made. So I'm just gonna drag my glue tip directly on top of all of these lines. And so I'm gonna start, again, I'm just kind of squeezing gently. I'm gonna start with doing my straight edges, so all my straight lines. So I've got all my straight lines drawn here, and then we're going to do the curved lines in between. And I think the easiest way is as you kind of let the glue connect to where you already have glue, and then holding your glue tip up just a little bit from the edge of the paper and kind of letting it trail behind rather than smearing it with the tip of your glue bottle. Kind of drag it and let it trail behind you a little bit, and then connect it to the next one. I'm going to continue. And so I'm just connecting all the lines here. Again, using my glue now on top of my drawn spider web. And if you feel like your glue is drying before you have time to outline the whole thing, you can do it in a couple segments as well. So you could outline your whole thing like I am, or you could outline just a portion and then cover in salt, and then go back and add more glue to the next section. But usually with the white glue, it takes quite a bit of time to dry. So you should be okay. Okay, so then again, you can either go over like your kitchen sink or over a bowl. And then we're just gonna shake our salt. I'm just shaking it straight out of my salt container here. And I'm gonna shake it directly onto my.
Hey Tessa, Catherine asked if you could use Epsom salt.
That's a great question, Catherine. I've not tried it, but I think it should work. If it's not too thick is the only thing. Sometimes if it's coarse salt, it might not take as much of the painting, but I think you should try it. I think it should probably work. Okay, so now you can see my spider web is pretty much all covered in salt. I'm gonna shake it around, make sure all my edges are covered. I'm just gonna dump that into my pan here. I'm shaking off a little bit, excess. Now we've covered our whole spider web. And so then we can start the actual painting, which is so fun. So again, you can use any size brush that you might want to use. And I'm going to start with a little orange. So again, I'm taking my paintbrush and I'm purposely not dragging my paintbrush along the edge of my bowl or anything like that. I'm making sure to get my paintbrush nice and wet and then dropping all of that water into my little paint pod. Kind of mix that around to make sure you get nice, good color on there. And then taking my saturated paintbrush, I'm going to drop that directly onto my salt. And then with this, it's less painting and more dabbing. So you're not really having to drag your paintbrush along the edges. I'm just kind of barely dabbing, just tapping the edge of my paintbrush onto the salt. And you can see up a little closer, maybe even, as I just tap my salt, it kind of starts to just immediately expand. And so like those little edges are already starting to meet each other. And so you just can tap a little bit and it starts to fill in.
And Tessa, which glue would you say is best?
I think pretty much any white craft glue. I'm using Elmer's glue, but any white liquid glue, you could use a tacky glue, even if that's maybe something that you have on hand. Or you can use like our Creatology glue as well. This works really well. And it's going to be a fairly similar like style to Elmer's glue. So any of those types of white glues would work. Something like a glue stick or hot glue, those wouldn't work well for this sort of craft. You want something that's going to take a little bit longer to dry and it's going to be like three-dimensional. So glue stick, even though you could maybe get salt to stick to it, it's not going to be three-dimensional like this. So as it, once you get it wet, it's not going to hold its shape. Okay. And then again, you can get mix and match colors, as many as you might want. You can do a full rainbow. And again, I'm just saturating my brush. So really kind of swirling it in my water and then putting all of that water from the tip of my brush into my little paint pod. And then you can start tapping it onto your salt. And that's when it gets really fun. You can start to see the colors blending together a little bit. And it creates a really pretty ombre pattern. So one color to the next kind of bleeds into each other and mixes it together. All right, I'm going to mix some water into some green now. It's a little darker green. I'm doing the same thing. So with all of your steps here, And the reason you want to make sure that you're getting enough water on there, that's what's going to help spread all of your color as it starts to grow, is the water. It starts to blend the colors together and kind of grow along the salt. If you just are using a different style paint, you can definitely paint it, but it's not going to leave the same sort of texture behind. And so adding a little bit of water there kind of lets it grow and expand. And there's another spider web. And then I would just leave them flat. If they, depending on how much water you got on your spider web, it can definitely pool and kind of move around a little bit. So just leaving them flat and letting them totally dry. And then, like I said, all the white that's behind where the glue is, that you can kind of see coming through your watercolor, that will all kind of fade away as the glue dries. And then it will become even more saturated in color. Okay, so I'm gonna set mine aside just so that we can continue. We've got another little colorful one here we could make. So again, I'm gonna go through it one last time here. So if you joined or if you are still making more with me, we're gonna go over the ones that we've already drawn. So we already drew our spider webs at the beginning. And then we're going to trace our lines that we drew in pencil with our glue. And again, as I'm kind of dragging my glue, I'm holding it up just a little bit above the paper so that my tip of my bottle isn't dragging on the paper itself. And that kind of lets the glue just kind of trail out instead. And then we're just connecting all of our lines with our little curved lines to complete the spider web look. Okay, so then we're gonna add some salt on here. So again, you can grab a bowl or anything you want to use to kind of dump your salt into. And straight from my salt jar here, I'm just gonna sprinkle the salt directly on to my paper and cover all of that glue with fine salt. There you have all sort of crystally, sort of looks like a little spiderweb skeleton at the moment. And then we're going to add our paint from there. So again, we're going to get our paintbrush nice and full of water. And we're going to do some purple paint. Again, you can mix and match any colors that you want. Just dipping my paintbrush back in my water a couple times to just get a little bit more water to really get some color out of my little paint pod. And then you're just going to tap it onto the salt. And you can watch that start to grow there. Just one little tap and there it starts going up. And you can do it all over if you want to do a bunch of different colors. Maybe we'll do this one a little more tie-dye. So we'll kind of just drop little bits of purple throughout. And see just a couple little taps, it all starts to grow and spread. And we'll pop in a little bit of green. Again, just barely tapping a little bit, and then that water just starts to grow and it'll start to spread and fill in more and more. And there you have another spider web, all made out of salt and a little bit of paint. And then again, this is going to dry and it will flatten a little bit, but it's going to mostly keep the same three-dimensional look, which is super fun. Okay, so we're gonna let those dry. So if you're at home, let those dry. You don't need to move them out of the way. But then once it does dry, if you want to, you can add some cute little spiders as well. So easy addition, like we talked about, is you can do just these little spiders made from pom-poms. So these are just Creatology pom-poms. And you can do any size that you want. And then you can either use your same Elmer's glue we've been using. This will take a little bit longer to dry on a pom-pom, but you're just gonna drop a little glue. And then I'm just gonna push my little pom-pom directly on and let them sit. And then you can take, might be a little harder to see on this black paper over the camera, but once your pom-pom is placed, I'm just going to draw little lines out from the edges. Do one on the other color too, so you can kind of see, but there's just a little bit, even in person, the black on black, you can see its little legs. But if you wanted to do one, we have, pull one of my pieces that's still drying. We've got one of our first ones here. You can see it's still drying, a little bit of pooling, but that's all going to lay flat as our glue and our water dries. But you could easily add onto here little spiders. I'm just going to drop a little bit of glue and then put a pom-pom directly into that glue. And then with our markers, I'm just going to kind of lean up right against the edge of where my pom-pom lands and then just draw little legs coming out. We'll do it on the other side as well. And then you have a little spider added on. If you did use black paper at home, in person, you can definitely still see the black marker on the paper, but you could always use glitter or another color as well if you wanted to. But again, I'm just going to do a little drop of glue and drop a little pom-pom kind of right at the edge, so it looks like it could be sitting on your spider web. And then I'm just going to take the tip of my marker and kind of go right underneath it a little bit and draw little legs coming out. And there you have your own little spider webs. And we are officially in October and in spooky season. So I hope that you guys had a lot of fun with our first Halloween inspired craft for the month. But I'm excited to be back with you all next week making more Halloween goodies. So I hope that your spiders turn out great, and I can't wait to craft with you all soon. Thanks so much.